They say life rarely announces when it's about to change. It doesn't knock politely or send an email. No, it walks in dressed like a celebration, clinks crystal glasses, and flashes you a smile so warm you don't realize the chill until it's already in your bones. That's exactly how the night at the Golden Fox felt. The city lights of Denver sparkled below us, and inside the rooftop's private dining room, everything gleamed. Linen napkins folded with military precision, champagne bubbling in gold-rimmed flutes, polished silver catching reflections of success. I stood near the head of the table, smiling like a woman who had it all, because for a fleeting moment, I believed I did. "A toast," said Daniel Reyes, the lead investor at Summit Venture Partners, rising with his glass in hand. "To Avery Collins," he announced, pausing just long enough to let the room hush. "The woman who took a crumbling local bakery and turned it into one of the most exciting national food brands we've seen in a decade. And to our $10 million partnership, one that will take Collins Harvest goods into every grocery store, every subscription box, every kitchen in America." The applause was thunderous. Even the waitstaff clapped. My team beamed. My mom teared up. My dad looked prouder than I'd seen him in years. And me? I smiled and raised my glass, because that's what you do when you're winning. But the thing about moments that seem perfect, they're often just the start of something breaking. I should have known better. My name is Avery Collins, and I've spent the last 8 years sacrificing nearly everything to build what this room was celebrating tonight. I left a 6-figure position as Vice President of Investment Strategy at JP Morgan. I gave up my apartment in Manhattan, a fiancé I didn't miss as much as I thought I would, and a lifestyle most people work decades for, all for a little bakery in Platt Park, Denver, the same one my parents opened when I was 6. The same one I'd watched slip toward bankruptcy when my dad called me in tears one Thursday afternoon and said, "We're going under, Av. I don't know what else to do." I came home that weekend. I never left again. What started as helping out for a few weeks turned into a full takeover. I handled everything: operations, marketing, supply chain, rebranding, even baking when staff didn't show. I maxed out credit cards, learned code at 2 a.m. to launch a Shopify store, and begged suppliers to give us 30 more days. I turned Collins Bakery into Collins Harvest Goods, a modern, sustainable, organic brand built on small batch products and direct-to-consumer subscription models. By year 3, we had 10,000 monthly subscribers. By year 5, we'd partnered with Whole and Fresh, and I was sitting across from Fortune 100 buyers. And now? Year 8, $10 million in new capital, projected annual revenue of $24 million, but none of that mattered. Not really. Not when I heard what came next. My mother leaned in during dessert. Her hand slipped into mine under the white tablecloth. Warm, gentle, familiar. She smiled with a softness that made my heart swell before it shattered. "This is all so exciting, sweetheart," she said quietly. "But when Ethan gets back next month from Wharton, we think it's best if he takes over as CEO." I blinked, unsure if I heard her right. Surely she didn't mean... But she kept going. "You've done a wonderful job, truly. We're all so proud. But this next phase, with growth on this scale? Ethan has the formal business training for it. He's ready." The champagne turned to acid in my stomach. "Let me tell you something about my brother Ethan. Ethan's the golden boy. He always has been. Star of every childhood photo. Captain of the debate team. Prom king. He took a gap year to find himself in Prague. Then he enrolled in an executive MBA program at Wharton, which he completed while hopping between internships in marketing firms that didn't know what to do with him. He's visited the bakery 3 times in 8 years, never stayed longer than a weekend. He's never packed a crate, never responded to a supplier emergency at midnight, never worried about making payroll or fixing a leaking refrigerator line in the middle of a snowstorm. But Ethan? He was the future. I was the filler. I forced a smile as I stared across the table at Daniel, who was now discussing logistics and branding rollout for our Q3 campaign. "Everything okay?" he asked, catching my expression. "Perfect," I said, lifting my glass. But behind the smile, something cracked. The applause, the investor check, the expansion, it all suddenly felt performative, temporary, conditional, like I had been brought this far to hold the door open for Ethan. And the worst part? This wasn't the first time. Flashback, 6 years earlier. Mom left a voicemail while I was still sleeping on a cot in the back room of the bakery. Just wanted to let you know, Ethan's thinking about joining the business someday. Wouldn't that be great? Maybe you two could work together. You could manage the creative stuff, and he could handle the business side. Back then, I laughed it off. Because I was exhausted, because I was lonely, because I still believed if I worked hard enough, someone would finally say, "This is yours." But tonight proved otherwise. At the restaurant, as the conversation turned towards strategic hires, international distribution, and rollout timelines, I stayed quiet. Not because I didn't have answers, because suddenly I wasn't sure the people in the room wanted mine. And when Daniel leaned in at the end of the night and whispered, "We should talk first thing Monday, just you," I knew what he meant. He'd seen it too. The way my mother's smile dimmed when she mentioned my brother. The flicker of doubt in my father's voice. Daniel wasn't just investing in a brand, he was investing in me. As we rode home in the black town car, my parents chatted excitedly about Ethan's return, about how proud he'll be when he sees how far we've come, about how nice it will be to have both kids involved. I stared out the window, watching the blur of city lights slide past. A plan was already forming. If they thought I was going to quietly step aside after 8 years of building something from ashes, then they were about to learn who they had underestimated. And this time I wasn't going to smile through it. Sleep didn't come that night. Not really. Not even with chamomile tea, meditation, or Meredith's old trick of naming every object in the room until your brain gives up and resets. By 3 a.m., I was just lying there with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me like some cosmic clock counting down to something inevitable. At 5:48 a.m., I gave up. By 6:12, I was pulling into the Collins Harvest Goods HQ parking lot, headlights slicing through the fog that blanketed the Denver morning like a warning sign. The building sat quiet and dark, its brick facade familiar and comforting, like an old friend holding its breath. It still smelled like sourdough and cedar inside. The hum of the refrigerators echoed through the silence, and for a moment, it felt like time had paused, like the entire building was waiting to see what I would do. I flicked on the lights and headed upstairs to my glass-walled office that overlooked the entire production floor. The Captain's Bridge, the team used to call it, back when it was just me and 3 people with more passion than paycheck. I didn't need coffee. I needed clarity, and I needed it fast. I powered up my laptop and opened the files I'd labeled for this exact moment, the ones I'd buried under "in case of fire" like it was a bad joke. The org chart, the employee directory, the supplier agreements, the investor roadmap, the disaster recovery plan, and finally, a folder I hadn't opened in nearly 4 years. Plan B, contingency exit. Inside it were legal frameworks, branding mock-ups, a business model for a parallel company that would mimic everything we'd built, without the family name attached. Wildgrain & Co. It had started as a therapeutic exercise, something I created after that awful phone call from Mom where she suggested I step back and give Ethan a chance to lead someday. I hadn't taken it seriously back then, but now it felt like a lifeline. I scrolled through the folder. My own brand identity decks, customer surveys, side-by-side product breakdowns of what Collins Harvest Goods would look like without me. Then I clicked open a spreadsheet titled, "If They Push Me Out, Here's What I Take With Me." And suddenly, the emotions hit, like waves. Not just the betrayal, the exhaustion, the countless nights I had stayed late finishing marketing copy because our freelancer bailed. The time I drove to Fort Collins at midnight to salvage a supplier relationship. The way I'd show up at trade shows, pitching with my whole soul, while my parents introduced Ethan to industry execs like he was the one running it all. This wasn't just about leadership. It was about being erased from my own legacy. I picked up my phone. There was only one person I could call this early and not feel bad about it. Meredith Lang, my old MBA professor turned mentor, friend, and part-time life coach. "It's 6:28, Avery," she said groggily, not even waiting for a greeting. "This better be amazing or catastrophic." "Both," I replied. "Can you get to HQ? I have coffee." She was there within 45 minutes, sweatpants, top knot, 3 legal pads in hand. "You weren't kidding," she muttered as I turned the laptop to show her the documents. "Oh, damn. They really said Ethan's taking over?" Like I was being relieved from jury duty. Meredith let out a low whistle and started scanning the screen. After 5 minutes of silence, she leaned back. "So, what do you want to do, Avery?" The question froze me. Not, "What are you going to do?" Not, "How do we respond?" But, "What do you want?" I'd been avoiding that question for years, because the truth was, I didn't just want to protect the company. I didn't just want my job. I wanted recognition. I wanted respect. I wanted to stop living like everything I'd built was some extended internship for Ethan's benefit. "I want to stop pretending," I said. "I want control, real control. And if they won't give it to me, I want the freedom to walk away and take what's mine with me." Meredith nodded slowly. "Then it's time to play chess, not checkers." We got to work. By 10 o'clock a.m., we had drafted a full counter-proposal, a leadership structure that kept me as CEO for 5 guaranteed years, with all operational authority legally bound. Meredith called in favors from 2 legal friends who owed her from some long-forgotten Harvard dispute, and by lunch, I had the first draft of what we started calling the Fireproof Plan. It was simple. Option 1, I stay. Legally binding CEO contract. Ethan gets an advisory role with no real power. Option 2, I leave. I launch Wild Grain & Co. New name, same mission, same team, same suppliers. The soul of the business walks with me. And here's the kicker. Every single one of our supplier contracts was signed under my personal LLC. Not my parents, not the company's, mine. They never noticed. They never asked. They never thought they had to, because they never saw me as a threat. At 1:45 p.m., I sent 3 texts. Sasha Lynn, head of marketing. Noah Rivera, fulfillment director. Rena Maxwell, product development lead. HQ in 45 minutes. Urgent, trust me. They were the 3 people who had been there from day one. Sasha joined when we had no branding, no customer persona, and no budget. She designed our first packaging on Canva. Noah had been our only fulfillment staffer during the 2020 chaos, hand-labeling jars with me in a freezing warehouse. Rena? She formulated every gluten-free recipe we'd become famous for. If anyone had the right to know what was coming, it was them. By 2:40 p.m., we sat around the breakroom table. Same one we used to eat bagged salads at when the company couldn't afford catered meetings. I laid it all out. The dinner, my mother's comment, the plan to hand Ethan the crown, and what I was preparing to do. There was silence for a long moment. Then Sasha said, "Honestly, I've been waiting for this." Noah nodded. "Your mom hasn't called you CEO once in a single team meeting." Rena leaned forward. "You leave, I leave." I swallowed hard. "You understand what this means, right? We'd be starting over. Again." Rena smiled. "Better than being invisible." That night, I stared at my laptop screen until nearly 1 a.m., finalizing slides, updating the financial models, rehearsing what I would say to Daniel Reyes and Summit Ventures on Monday. I labeled the presentation, "The Backbone Plan, Reclaiming Ownership." But the truth? It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about Ethan. It was about choosing myself. For the first time since I moved back to Denver and stepped into that dying bakery 8 years ago, I wasn't here to prove myself. I was here to protect myself and build something that no one, not family, not tradition, not false narratives, could ever take away again. Sunday morning in Denver felt like the world was holding its breath. There was no wind, no noise. The streets were still, as if the universe itself knew something big was about to shift. In my apartment, the only sound was the soft clicking of my keyboard. I sat in my kitchen, surrounded by printouts, yellow legal pads, highlighters, cold coffee, and 3 open laptops. One screen displayed our current financial projections. Another had a slideshow in progress titled Wild Grain & Co., A Vision Without Chains. The third screen showed a blinking cursor over a blank email draft addressed to Daniel Reyes, Summit Venture Partners. Subject line, Proposal for Strategic Realignment, Urgent Meeting Request. It felt surreal, watching it all materialize into something real. For years, this was a theoretical safety net, a file named Plan B buried beneath optimistic projections and loyalty to a legacy that didn't see me. But now, it was my lifeline, and I was done waiting. At 8:15 a.m., I arrived at a downtown co-working space I'd rented under the temporary LLC we had set up. WGC Enterprises. No signage, no family branding, just clean walls, a long table, and silence. At 8:26, Meredith walked in wearing a denim jacket over a gray hoodie, toting 2 coffees and a giant tote filled with sticky notes, markers, and binders, like we were cramming for finals. "You look like hell," she said cheerfully, handing me a cup. "I feel like it." "I take it that means you're ready." I nodded. "Let's roll." By 8:45, Daniel Reyes and Jared Daniels from Summit Ventures arrived. No suits today, just crisp shirts and that quiet intensity that always signaled, they're here to listen, but only if it's worth their time. Meredith and I ushered them into the meeting room. Daniel gave me a small, unreadable smile. "You asked for a private session. Just you, no family. I'm assuming this isn't just a pitch deck review." "You're right," I said, clicking the remote to begin the presentation. "This is not a pitch, this is a line in the sand." Slide 1, Collins Harvest Goods, current org structure. We walked through the leadership roles, current responsibilities, and reporting structure. My title, CEO. But in practice, shared control with my parents. Influence from Ethan even before his official return. Slide 2, forecasted org chart. Post-Ethan return. I highlighted subtle but critical shifts. Ethan listed as co-CEO, me reclassified under brand and innovation, and major financial decisions shifting to joint oversight. Slide 3, market performance trends, founder-led versus heir-led succession. The data spoke for itself. Companies that transitioned from founder-led to heir-run leadership saw a 34% decline in valuation on average within 3 years. Because customers don't buy bloodlines, I added, locking eyes with Daniel. They buy vision and consistency, and they buy leadership they trust. He nodded slightly. "So what's your ask?" I flipped to slide 4, a new path forward, Wildgrain & Co. Built by the same people, same suppliers, same product line, but this time without the family legacy weighing down the innovation. Jared raised a brow. "So you're suggesting redirecting the $10 million investment into a new entity?" "Yes," I said, "because that's the only way I can guarantee Summit's investment won't be compromised by personal politics." I handed each of them a black folder. Inside were exclusive supply contracts signed under my personal LLC, trademark pre-registration for Wildgrain & Co., staffing retention data showing that 12 of our 15 core team members had indicated, in an anonymous internal survey, they would follow me to a new company. "You don't have a brand without me," I said, "and I don't have security with the Collins name, so I'm offering you a better option." The room was quiet for a long beat. Then Daniel said, "You've been preparing this for a while." 3 years, I answered, since the first time my mom suggested I'd be happier letting Ethan lead. Jared leaned forward. "And if your parents agree to keep you as CEO, formally and legally, would you still walk?" I hesitated. "No," I said honestly, "but I won't stay without a contract. I won't let myself be a placeholder again." That afternoon I drove back to HQ. The sun had started to peek out from behind the clouds, but inside the building, the air was still thick with tension. Most of the employees had heard whispers of Ethan's return, and they moved like people waiting for the other shoe to drop. I gathered Sasha, Noah, and Rena in the break room and told them everything. Wildgrain, the proposal, the fact that Summit was considering redirecting the full investment. Sasha leaned back, arms folded. "You're telling me you might walk away from the company you built?" "No," I said. "I'm telling you I might finally claim the company I built." Rena pulled a folded piece of paper from her bag and slid it across the table. It was a list. 12 names. Department heads, senior staff, logistics managers. Beside each name was one word. Yes. "We already asked," she said. "We saw this coming." Noah added, "We're not loyal to the family name. We're loyal to you." That night, around 10 p.m., my phone buzzed. "Dad, Ethan's flight lands in the morning. We're doing breakfast at the house, then heading into HQ. You coming?" I stared at the text for a long time, then typed back, "I'll be there, and I'll be ready." I didn't sleep that night either. But this time, I wasn't anxious. I was awake with clarity. And clarity is power. Monday morning in Denver came cloaked in silence. There was no dramatic sunrise, no birdsong outside my window, just a dense, overcast sky that felt like it was holding back a storm. And in a way, it was. By 6:30 a.m., I stood in front of my full-length mirror, adjusting the belt of my tailored black blazer. I had worn this only twice before, both times in front of investors. But this morning, I wasn't dressing to impress. I was dressing for war. I grabbed my laptop, the black folder marked Wild Grain Final, and the presentation remote. As I walked out of my apartment, I didn't look back. At 7:15 a.m., I arrived at Collins Harvest Goods HQ. The building looked just like any other day, sleek, modern, calm. But inside, the air was electric. Sasha was already waiting in the lobby, holding a coffee with my name scribbled on it in Sharpie, her signature Monday ritual. "You good?" she asked. I took the coffee. "No," I said honestly, "but I'm ready." By 7:45, Noah, Rena, and half of our senior leadership team had arrived. No one spoke much, but the energy was palpable. We were moving like people who had drawn their battle lines. At 8:25 a.m., the office lights flicked brighter as more staff started arriving. There was tension in the air, conversations happening in hushed voices, glances exchanged by the water cooler. Rumors had clearly spread. 8:30 a.m. Right on time, my parents arrived. My mother wore a crisp navy pantsuit, her pearls gleaming, lipstick perfect. She walked like she owned the room, like she was about to unveil the future of the company. My father followed behind, less composed, shoulders tight. Neither of them looked at me as they entered. 8:42 a.m. The prodigal son arrived. Ethan strolled in, sipping an oat milk latte, dressed in a tailored light gray suit with no tie. Just the right amount of Silicon Valley casual to say, "I'm confident, I belong here, and I didn't have to earn it." He flashed his signature grin, high-fived someone in operations he likely couldn't name, and made a beeline toward my office. "Ready to co-lead, sis?" he asked, tapping twice on the glass wall before strolling away. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I was beyond words. 9:00 a.m. The elevator chimed. The energy in the office froze. Daniel Reyes, Jared Daniels, and two of Summit Ventures' legal advisors stepped out. All of them carried sleek, black leather folders and an air of finality. My mother stepped forward with a warm, polished smile. "Mr. Reyes, we're so thrilled you're here. I'd love to introduce you to—" Daniel cut her off, not unkindly, but firmly. "Actually, Mrs. Collins, we're here to meet with Avery, but I believe it would be best if everyone joined." Her smile faltered, only slightly. "Of course," she said tightly. The conference room. It was like a courtroom. A polished oak table, floor-to-ceiling windows. The air was thick with unspoken agendas. I took the seat at the head of the table. Daniel and the Summit team sat to my right. My parents and Ethan took the left side, mirroring us. Behind me, like a silent army, stood Sasha, Noah, Rena, and 6 other department leads who had quietly entered moments before. No one spoke. Finally, Daniel placed a black folder on the table, opened it, and said, "Before we begin, I'd like to state for the record, our investment was predicated on Avery's leadership, her vision, her execution, and her team. Any change to that leadership represents a material deviation from the agreement." My mother shifted uncomfortably. Ethan cleared his throat and leaned forward. "Look, I think there's been some misunderstanding," he said with smooth confidence. "I'm not here to replace anyone. I just want to contribute. I have an executive MBA. I've worked in consulting. I bring a fresh perspective." Daniel didn't blink. "To contribute? To what exactly, Mr. Collins?" he asked. "You've never attended a leadership meeting. You've never managed a crisis. You weren't here during the rebrand, or the shipping crisis, or the pivot to subscription. What exactly are you prepared to lead?" Silence. My father leaned forward, attempting to mediate. We've always envisioned this company as a family business, with both our children involved, each bringing their own strengths. I locked eyes with him. I've been running this company for 8 years, alone. My voice didn't shake. It cut. I gave up my career, my savings, my health. I rebuilt this from bankruptcy to $10 million in revenue. I did that. Not Ethan, not both of us. My mother's face hardened. We're not trying to erase your contributions, Avery, she said, but we believe Ethan can guide us through this next phase. You mean replace me? I said. Let's stop pretending it's anything else. Daniel pushed 2 folders across the table. These are our 2 options, he said simply. Option A. Avery Collins remains CEO for a guaranteed 5-year term. Ethan takes on a non-executive advisory role, reporting directly to the CEO. Option B. We withdraw our investment from Collins Harvest Goods and redirect it into a new entity, Wild Grain & Co., founded and led by Avery. No family involvement. My mother paled. Ethan looked stunned. You're starting your own company? He asked, incredulous. You're competing against your own family? I leaned forward. No, I'm protecting what I built, because I will not spend another year being undermined by people who weren't here when it mattered. Then, a sound behind me. The door opened. 10 more employees entered quietly and stood against the back wall. Our creative lead, warehouse manager, customer service head, even our pastry chef. One by one, they nodded toward me. Sasha stepped forward. Sorry to interrupt, she said clearly, but we wanted to be here. If Avery walks, we walk. Not out of loyalty to her, but out of loyalty to the values this company was built on. The ones she lives, not just preaches. Ethan's mouth opened, then closed. My mother looked like she'd been slapped. My father stared at the folder, jaw clenched. Daniel stood. You have until the end of the day to decide, he said. We will not drag this out. Either you support the leadership that brought you here, or you watch us walk away. No one spoke. No one needed to. The decision was already made. But my parents just didn't know it yet. Back in my office, I finally let out the breath I'd been holding since Friday night. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat down, pulled open the window blinds, and looked out at the city skyline. And for the first time in 8 years, I felt free. Monday evening crept in like the aftermath of a storm, quiet, solemn, and heavy with unspoken truths. By 4:12 p.m., I was staring at the blinking cursor on my laptop, unable to focus on a single email. My eyes burned, not from exhaustion, but from restraint. The kind of restraint you only learn when you've been silenced too many times, when you've had to nod and smile while watching others rewrite your story. Then my phone buzzed. Dad. We're in the conference room. Can you come down? No fanfare, no we've made a decision, just a message that felt final. I stood, my legs momentarily stiff, like I'd been holding in tension for so long that my muscles forgot how to relax. With a deep breath, I walked downstairs into the same conference room that had almost become a courtroom that morning. They were already seated. My mother, hands folded perfectly in front of her. My father, slouched slightly, tired in a way that felt older than him. Ethan, arms crossed, his jaw clenched, eyes hard. A thick silence followed as I sat down at the opposite end. My father slid the folder across the table, the one with my name as CEO. We'll sign this one, he said quietly. I didn't move, I didn't smile, I didn't say thank you, because this wasn't a gift, it wasn't grace, it was a reckoning. My mother looked up, her voice steadier than I expected. You've made it clear that we underestimated you. I met her gaze. No, you didn't underestimate me, I said. You just never believed that what I built was real unless it came from Ethan. She flinched, barely, but enough. This company thrived because of sweat, sacrifice, and vision, my vision. And I don't need validation anymore. I needed clarity. And I got it. Ethan leaned forward, his tone sharp and bitter. So what? I get some vanity title now, vice president of nothing? You get a title that matches your contribution, I replied coolly, which is to say, ceremonial. Zero authority, no illusions. By 6 p.m., the legal paperwork was filed. Everything became official. Avery Collins, CEO of Collins Harvest Goods, 5-year binding agreement. Ethan Collins, VP of Business Development, non-voting, non-strategic. Marcus and Helen Collins, brand ambassadors, no operational control. It was done. It was mine. And for the first time in 8 years, I didn't feel like I was borrowing the title. I owned it. 6 months later, there's a funny thing that happens when people finally recognize what they tried so hard to deny. They pivot. They adapt. They rewrite the story so they were always supportive. That's what happened at Collins Harvest Goods. We expanded to a 60,000 square foot facility in Aurora. We landed in over 320 retailers nationwide. Q2 revenue exceeded projections by 41%, and our subscriber base topped 42,000 households. But the biggest change? Me. I stopped trying to explain myself. I stopped overcompensating. I stopped attending meetings where I wasn't respected, family or not. My relationship with my parents settled into a cordial, distant rhythm. We smiled for quarterly photo ops. We hugged at Thanksgiving. But we didn't talk strategy or vision or Ethan's disappearing act, who now occupied an office 3 doors down that still looked like a showroom. It was fine, not fulfilling, not joyful, but no longer destructive. A private moment. One Thursday afternoon, I stood in the break room refilling my tea when Noah walked in. He leaned on the counter beside me like he used to back when we'd crash here after 12-hour days. "Remember that time we drove to Cheyenne in a blizzard to deliver 800 boxes because FedEx canceled on us?" he asked, grinning. I laughed. "Yeah, you kept singing Beyoncé the entire drive." He shrugged. "We needed the motivation." There was a beat of silence before he added, "I'm glad you didn't walk. We all are." I looked around, at the faces laughing in the production bay, the intern showing a new hire how to use our label printer, the wall of Polaroids we'd added behind the break room door. "I didn't stay for them," I said softly. "I stayed for us." Redefining legacy. I used to think legacy was something passed down, a name, a business, a torch. But I've come to understand that legacy isn't inherited. It's earned. It's what you build when no one is looking, what you protect when everyone's watching, what you risk when you could play it safe. It's saying no to the roles they assign you and yes to the fire inside you. It's walking away if you have to, so you can come back on your terms. And sometimes legacy looks like a woman who used to sleep on flour sacks, now sitting at the head of a multi-million-dollar brand, not because it was handed to her, but because she refused to be erased. Final scene. As I walked through the production floor one morning, clipboard in hand, Sasha trailing behind with our new social media intern, someone stopped me near the pallet wall. A young woman from customer service. "Avery," she said, nervous, "I just wanted to say, you're the reason I applied here." I paused. "Why?" "Because I saw your story in a podcast about how you stood your ground, how you kept your seat. It made me think, maybe I could too." I smiled. For the first time, it wasn't about the jam jars or the revenue or the titles. It was about impact. It was about the quiet permission we give others when we choose ourselves. I may still carry the Collins name on my business cards, but my true legacy? That has nothing to do with my last name, and everything to do with the woman I refuse to stop becoming.